papers or reading something, so you will come across the word rail transport. This is railways. Yeah, this is different areas call it different things. Then we have train transport. Then you call it, there are people who call it railroads. Americans normally they don't say railways, they say railroads. Development of railroads in the US, development opening of the US through railroads, उसको railroads कहते हैं. Then rail based, this is another term being used. And when we talk of say mass transit systems, one is of course the BRT, the buses, then you have the rail based mass transit system. So these are all railway related words. Then as we've been talking that what is railways? Railways, of course, a means of transportation. It is a very, very important mode of transportation which connects 2 points. And in those 2 points, then we have the railway infrastructure, and we have railway vehicles running, or usko operations फिर कहते हैं. And we will go into then details के पाकिस्तान में क्या है क्या नहीं. And then the basic thing is that in a railway, railway means of transport, there are vehicles that are being run on assigned tracks. And those tracks you can't move from here to there. They're there. So then the tracks are normally known as rails. They are also known as railroads. And as in the US, when you talk of a railway line, there you have to say it's a railroad. So that's the difference. So when the Americans refer to railways, they will say railroads. So you should be aware KG is talking of. And there are other people who will talk of rail. KG rail pe chalte hain. That means trains, rail based. And of course, vehicles run on tracks. So for those tracks, vehicles have to be specified. How do you specify them? Because you have to specify them through the moving dimensions and keeping in view the safety aspects and keeping in view the gauge. Track ka gauge hota hai khas. So you can have a narrow gauge track, you can have a broad meter gauge track, you can have a standard gauge track, and you can have a broad gauge track. So yeah, these are, just to आगे चलेंगे देखते हैं. But let me just explain here कि a narrow gauge track. A narrow gauge track means 2 feet 6 inches. Now these are sort of parameters which have been internationalized. Narrow gauge means 2 feet 6 inches. Meter gauge means 1 meter wide. And Pakistan has been, we have had a combination of narrow gauge, meter gauge, and broad gauge. So meter gauge, kahan pe hai meter gauge? We use now, it's no more there, but it used to be there from Mirpur Khas to Khokrapar, from Mirpur Khas to Nawab Shah, from Mirpur Khas to ek loop banti thi. So these were meter gauge coaches, 1 meter wide between 2 wheels. Then narrow gauge used to be from Kohat to Tal. It used to be from Madi Indus to Banu. And at one time, D.I. Khan was joined. And then we had from Quetta, sort of Bostan to Fort Sandeman, Rajkal Job. And these were narrow gauge lines. But they are not functioning. Ji?
Broader gauge हमारे पास कितना होता है सर?
ये मैं आ रहा हूँ. ये तो मैंने आपको सिर्फ बताया ना कि narrow gauge 2 feet 6 inches khatam. We don't run trains on them. I managed to collect some locomotives, narrow gauge, and some coaches. You can see them in Golra Museum. And whenever you want to go, just tell me, I'll arrange a good trip for you people. And then meter gauge, maybe I have 1 locomotive and a few coaches. Otherwise, tamam khatam hogi. Then on the standard gauge, which is 4 feet 8 inches, which is a standard gauge in most of the world. Yeah, you go to China, it is 4 feet 8 inches. You go to Europe, it is 4 feet 8 inches. But Pakistan, we don't have the standard gauge. But, yes, we do have the broad gauge. For broad gauge is 5 feet 6 inches. And broad gauge, we have about 7,700 kilometers of broad gauge track, which is working, which is functioning. So ये इसका फर्क है. But there are different other gauges. There is a Russian gauge which is even wider than 5 feet 6 inches, जो हमारा broad gauge है ना. And these, when you go back into history, you will see that वो कहते हैं कि the fight of gauges. How did we determine that? Okay, we will have. How did the people at that time come to this decision that we will have a 5 feet 6 inch gauge rather than the standard gauge which they were using in Europe and in Britain at that time? They didn't come here. They should have just adopted the standard gauge. No, but for India, for the subcontinent, they said no, we need broader coaches and we need wider coaches. We need wider wagons so that we can carry more bulk commodities. And at that time, of course, what were the bulk commodities? It was cotton and coal and all these things. So then they adopted. But let me tell you, the gauge does not sort of infringe on the quality and the speed and the efficiency of a train or a railway system. It is just a gauge. And gauges are normally, when you go into a mountainous area, then maybe you will have a smaller gauge because it is better to have small curves there. In the mountainous areas, you will be faced with curves which are of a higher degree. So there the narrow gauge and the meter gauge is more efficient than the broad gauge. So वो देखना पड़ता है कि where would you like your orange line, for example, is standard gauge. Since this was a new thing, so they went into standard. Those coaches, you can't bring them onto Pakistan Railway tracks. They are meant for orange line. Then railways, it is a cost-effective mode and supposedly for people to commute, connecting to points and for carriage of goods. So how is it cost-effective? That we're going to see later on, but just to tell you that only one diesel electric locomotive, which is attached to a train which can carry about 1,000 to 1,200 passengers and which can carry up, say, 2,400 tons of cargo. The amount of fuel it consumes is much less than if you carry the same amount, 2,400 tons of cargo by trucks. So different trucks using a lot of fuel and a lot of sort of drivers. Here, just one driver, one fireman, we call him assistant driver, and one guard is more than enough to pull out 2,400 tons of cargo, and it can go at 80 to 100 kilometers per hour. This is as good as any in the world. So that is why we say it is cost effective. And when it comes to volumes, then of course it becomes much more cost effective. Then, as we discussed in the last lectures, inherent benefit of lesser friction resistance. As I said, the entire transport is based on overcoming friction. In the railways, the friction is overcome. Why? In a much easier way, in a better way, in a more financially viable way. Less costs are required to overcome the friction because the interaction is between two polished surfaces. One is the rail surface and one is the wheel surface. So then that traction which is required to get into higher speeds, which is required to pull heavy bulk cargo, is much more efficient, especially on the road. Then roads, of course, where the tire interacts with the road surface. And the better the road surface, your interaction will be better. But our system, you have all these roads are not very good, frankly. So the cost of transportation becomes higher and higher. Due to what? Through frictional resistance. Yeah, so we have talked of this. And the inherent advantage for railways for carrying bulk and for carrying people and freight for long distances and for getting into economies of scale, one after the other, you can have these trains running on the same railway line. And naturally, when the magnitude is more, when the volumes are more, it is much more efficient, much more financially viable. Then railways, frankly, keep in mind, people will tell you a lot of things about railways. It is the way you look at it. It is nothing but train operations. Nothing but train operations. The unfortunate part is that our leadership, people in the political leadership, people at the highest levels, at the ministry level, when you talk of operations, it is a very, very complex thing, especially train operations are very complex. They just do not, understand the jargon of train operations. They don't want to hear about train operations. So, masle hote hain, and so nothing else but passenger and freight trains. How best you can make use of those assets and how best you can transport and how efficiently you can transport and how financially viably you can transport. That is where the thing is. And let me tell you, when you talk of railways, it has the potential even today of being financially viable, even making 2 + 2 is equal to 5, provided the assets are used in a proper way. When we go to railways, I will show you how the things have been misused. But operations railways if anyone talks of land, utilization of the land is very expensive. They keep on telling you, even political people will tell you, gee, why not make use of land? Then if you're talking of land, please don't talk of train operations and don't talk of railways then. Land utilization, real estate development is a different thing. The land, let me also tell you here that the land has become very expensive these days on all railway stations. Why? Because most of your towns, most of your villages, your cities, they have developed around railway stations. पहले railway station आया, उसके बाद शहर आए, build up हुए. Why? And that is why they are very. So people will tell you, okay, sir, we can make a lot of money from land. Let me just give you one example. I did a study when I was GM Railways, heading the railways. So for from year 2000 to 2010, we had sold land, we had leased out land in the most commercial centers of Pakistan, in Karachi, in Lahore, in Pindi, in Peshawar. Jaga people had leased out land. When I collected the data, total revenue generation, which we had collected from the sale of these lands, was 3.5 billion rupees. 3.5 billion in 10 years. And each of these cases was either with the FIA or was in the court. So not very clean, frankly. And for one train today, if you want to run a train a day from, say, Pindi to Karachi, you need at least 10 to 15 billion rupees. So it was not even worth 1/3 of a train, frankly. And look at the bad press we got. Look at what flack we got. FIA cases, NAB cases, court cases, and we are still, the railways are still into it. Well, I don't know whether maybe you heard of it. This golf club in Lahore, a huge scandal. Even till today, the case is in the Supreme Court, and we didn't get much out of it. So I'm just saying that trains are much more important. When you talk of railways, talk of train operations. Talk of getting money out of train operations, not through land. Yes, if you can get money out of land, I'm not saying don't get it, but concentrate when you talk of railways, concentrate on your main business and your main sort of activity, which is train operations. And as I said, train operations are nothing else except passenger and freight operations. But yeah, then a train, what is a train? It is powered by an engine, which is known as a locomotive. Normally, Zuban they call it an engine. Otherwise, it is a locomotive for railway people. And locomotives have been steam. Steam has been done away with, finished. That story is gone. Today, we have diesel electric and electric locomotives, which run trains. Then, of course, in some places, even the coaches they have these traction motors and they provide power to the train. but I'm talking of generally of Pakistan Railways. So we have this one locomotive which is pulling. If you have more load, you put two locomotives. In certain countries, even a freight train will have even 11 locomotives to 12 locomotives. Why? Because the length of the train and the tonnage it is carrying and the load it is carrying is too much for one locomotive or two locomotives. So they have these, if on the average, if you say that one locomotive, a 3000 horsepower, can carry, say, about 2500 tons, then multiply it 11, multiply it by 11, and you get 2500 multiply by 11. आपको पता चल जाएगा कितने टन वो लेके जा रहा है. And normally in the US and in Canada, when a freight train is passing, it is an actual nightmare for road users. वो खत्म ही नहीं होती. It doesn't finish. Keeps on going, keeps on going. There are hundreds of freight wagons attached to it. Then the train operations, when you talk of railways, signaling is a very important aspect of train operations. In every railway system, the signaling system is complex. This is actually the trains run, not because the driver wants it to run or the station master wants it to run. It is the signal that allows the train systems to run. And because of signaling, then the same railway track can be used again and again. In most, for example, the Orange Line, I think the gap between two trains, so I forgot the exact word, but it is about 2 minutes. You just, one train goes, after 2 minutes, another train comes. And it is all because of signaling. So on the ML1, we had planned most modern signaling with the Chinese, of course. And out here, then this gap would have been reduced to less than 4 or 5 minutes. One train leaves Karachi, after 5 minutes, another train can leave Karachi. After 5 minutes, another freight train can leave or any other train. And it is very safe and it becomes safer because of modern signaling. And you can have multiple routes network on the entire network then. And then rail transport, the advantage of rail transport is that it is the fastest mode on land. For example, anywhere in the world you go except for Germany, the speed limits are 120 kilometers per hour or maybe 140 kilometers per hour. I traveled a few years back in the US, only one highway, one expressway had a limit of 140 kilometers per hour. Otherwise, all over US you go, it is 120. Similarly, in England, in France, it is almost 120 or maybe some unique cases of 140. Our motorways are 120 kilometers per hour, but the trains can go at much higher speeds. Why? Because it has the right of way and it has the capacity and the technology to move. In China now, trains are moving at 300 kilometers plus and connecting almost every city. Some of them are running at 350. Now I'm talking of commercial transportation. Experiments, of course, can be anything. The trains have even gone at 460 kilometers per hour. One hour train for testing, but on commercial basis, then of course it is 300 and 350. That is why it is the fastest. And these days, because of the speed of the trains, they are competing with the airlines on one side and with the road on the other side. And they're taking all the traffic, especially passenger traffic, away from the roads. And even on the freight side. And then rail transport the aspect of this characteristic of this means of transportation, this mode of transportation, is that it is dependable in terms of safety. Even with all the bad tracks that we have in Pakistan, the amount of derailments that take place, a derailment frankly is a little scary when you look at it from a common man's point of view. From a railway man's point of view, derailments, they're just, it's a routine business. And normally not much damage is done. It should happen, of course, I'm not saying it should happen. There should be zero accidents. Once our tracks are upgraded, there will be no accidents. There are no accidents in Japan in places like China and Germany and all. Maybe one odd in 10 years, one odd accident. So they're dependable in terms of safety. That is why people prefer it. And once you put a sort of your goods onto the track in one place, it has to reach the other point. It can't go from here to there. It has to reach that. So that is why it is dependable or in terms of the safety and all that. Then trains have this characteristic that whatever the weather, whether it is snowing, whether it is raining, whether it is whatever happens, trains will keep on running. Unless, of course, there's a huge earthquake or something, some huge flooding and the track is blown away or there's a lot of destruction, that is something else. But in normal times, snow does not affect railways much. Rains do not affect it, hailstorms do not, the heat does not. So in China, there are trains running from, say, in Harbin, there's a city in the north, the temperatures may be below, maybe -30. And the same train comes in after 5-6 hours, it reaches the 6-7 hours, it reaches the tropical areas. Then the temperatures go up to maybe 40 degrees centigrade. And at times it may even reach 50 degrees in desert areas. So it doesn't matter much. So weather does not affect them. Then rail transport is better organized than any other medium of transport. Why is it better organized? Because it has a system put in place where the operating people who run these trains, who manage these trains, they have gone through certain training courses. They've been certified to do it. Safety is a very important aspect. It's not like a bus driver. A train driver is much different. He has to go through certain trainings. He has to go through almost 1 year, 2 years of training. He gets certificates for that. He has to learn the road. He has to know what the railway line is like before he is put onto a train. It's not like a bus driver who just gets a license and you put him on a bus or a truck and he starts moving. And then, of course, because it is much more organized, the medical tests, their eyesight tests, and this is true for all railways, not Pakistan Railways, everywhere. So that is why it is much more organized. Railways, of course, one thing is that the routes are fixed and the schedules are fixed. Whether it is freight trains or whether it is passenger trains, you have a certain time. Of course, I'm not saying okay, you follow the. At times, the schedules are upset. Why? Because there may be some kind of an accident or some obstruction on the tracks or something may happen, but the schedules are there. So that is why, and the routes are fixed. If a train has to come from Karachi to Peshawar, it has to come to Peshawar. It can't go via DA Khan. It has to come to Peshawar. So fixed routes. Then, as I said, we already talked of this, the environment-friendly means of transport. At least 1/7, 1/8 more friendlier than road transport. And we are talking of land. Then, of course, it is a much safer. Why? Because all the safety things are there. In Pakistan Railways, for example, in all railways, there's a regulator who is looking at the safety aspect. In Pakistan, we have the federal government inspector of railways who represents the federal government, and he looks at the safety aspects of transportation on railways. Even the slightest difference of maybe a millimeter or 2 millimeters, that is even noticed, it can't. Those moving dimensions have to be followed. The platform and the gap between the platform and the coach has to be according to a certain limit. So as you just can't have any vehicle coming on to these things. These are properly designed, properly monitored, properly then regulated, and properly looked at by the federal government inspector of railways. That is why it is supposed to be when I say safe, you must be thinking that here is a person who is telling us it is safe. There are so many accidents. The worst accident that happened in railways was Sanghi accident. I think it was in 92 or 93. 200 and something people died, 210 or 20 or something. But on the roads, let me tell you, 5,000-6,000 people die every month. Most of them are not reported. Most of them are not reported. Reported up, you have a look at, take a look at, Google kare, you'll find out how many accidents take place every day. So that way, again, still, whatever our safety system in Pakistan Railways may not be that good, but it is still much safer, still much safer. And when you look at other railways, of course, they don't have accidents. Why? Because their entire perimeters of safety are in place. We tend to compromise because of, again, financials and lack of, commitments and all that, but mainly lack of finances. And the best part is, in railways, if a track is not fit enough, you just reduce the speed and it becomes safe. If a track is not fit for 120 kilometers per hour, you think, yeah, there's a safety issue, some investment needs to be made, and you don't have that investment, just reduce it, put an engineering restriction of 100 kilometers per hour, it becomes safe. Even if at 100 you think it is not safe, bring it down to maybe 80 kilometers per hour and it becomes safe. So it is a safe system. Then in railways, services are more certain, they're uniform and regular compared to others. Once a schedule is made, it has to, Khyber Mail has to leave Peshawar at 10:30 in the night. Tezgam has to leave Rawalpindi at 8 o'clock. It may at times be delayed by 10-15 minutes, or maybe by half an hour, maybe by 2 hours. So flooding hogi, something, whatever, earthquake aa gaya. There are some issues with the track or something, but it has to reach. So it is generally regular and certain. One day Tezgam will run, the other day it will not run. It does happen when things go really bad. I was told that in Sudan, they used to run one train a day from their main headquarters into Khartoum. Khartoum, and I've forgotten the name of the city. Only one train per day used to run, and the entire railway headquarters used to go and see off the train, and then finished. And that train too was not very good. So things went bad out there, but once upon a time it was a good railways. So services are more certain, uniform, and regular as compared to other modes of transport. Then rail transport is an enabler of economic progress. I personally feel that a railway network, a robust railway network, a strong railway network, a speedy railway network, an efficient railway network in Pakistan can reduce the cost of doing business and it can boost the economy up. When we talk of GDP growth, frankly, now this is again my personal view, Pakistan cannot progress at 6% or 7% growth rate unless you have a strong railway network. Why? Because we are made that way geographically, geopolitically, geostrategically. Pakistan has a real good position. Karachi, ports of Karachi, then you have Upper Sindh, you have Punjab, you have Balochistan, and connectivity with Iran, with India on the east, then you have China and Afghanistan, and north in Peshawar. Lot of traffic generated in all these areas, what is Pakistan, and through connectivity, a lot of traffic from outside these countries. So it is a great enabler of economic progress. I personally feel that without this ML1 upgradation, our rate of growth will not go beyond 6 or 7%. Railway has to be there. In fact, the railway's growth has to be 1-2% more than the economy's growth. Only then it can keep pace with the progress. You have industrial areas, you have SEZs, you have SEZ means special economic zones, China ke saath. If you don't have connected by rail and the volumes don't move out by trains, then I really don't think it'll be a financially viable situation for these SEZs and for. So that is why the Chinese are stressing that you need to upgrade your railways. Now, unfortunate part is they have to tell us. We were just having a discussion that they're talking of this great development that is going on in Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia, of course, they don't have that kind of brains where they can plan for the future. But since they have the money, they can get people who can plan for them. We should be planning for ourselves. We are good enough. So we need to redefine what we want. And for that, I keep saying again and again, a strong railway line, ML1 especially, if not ML2, ML3, all are required. Connectivity to Gwadar is required. Connectivity to China is required. Connectivity to Afghanistan is required. So only then economic development can take place properly. And this is the future. I can see the future. Maybe we are not there at that time, but this has to come. If you want, like Europe is connected. You book a container from Rotterdam port, take it anywhere in Europe. It is so efficient. You can go by train or by road, or by, if a distance is shorter, they go by road. Otherwise, they go by train. It's very efficient. Then in railways, we have these different types. This way we will, of course, talk more of this. We have passenger railways, then underground and overground urban metro railways, and we have freight trains. And in passenger railways, there are so many types where you can have the suburban trains, the intercity trains, the mass transit system trains, and mass transit system means underground, overground, and then the freight trains. And again, freight trains is a different world. Saying just freight trains is very easy, but each commodity has different dynamics. Each commodity requires different kinds of coaches, different kinds of terminals, different kinds of people to handle it. You will be surprised when you look at the oil industry, when you go to the oil terminals. ये लोग ही different हैं. When you talk to them of fertilizer, they'll say, okay, इसके नहीं पता. When loading coal, it is a different ball game. It is a different world. Then in the railways, one important aspect you need to keep in mind, since you're all engineers, I'm talking of the bigger railway system. I'm not looking at a railway from a civil engineer or a mechanical point of view. Then the important thing is economies of scale. Economies of scale means that the more you run, the more volumes you run, the more operations you have, the more trips you have, the more you get money out of your infrastructure and your assets. Now, if I have a train, full train, comprising of say 11 coaches, going from Pindi to Lahore, it'll take 4 hours. Then I say, okay, what's one trip is more than enough. That does not make sense. You have invested in the locomotives, you have invested in the coaches, you have invested in the infrastructure. Now these things have to be used more and more. And the more you make use of it, wo isko economies of scale kehte hain. Don't stop it. From there, the train, if you the rake is there, it can go. If you don't have traffic coming back to Rawalpindi, maybe you utilize it, the entire thing from Lahore to Faisalabad. People will go. Bring it back from Faisalabad and connect it back to Rawalpindi. And from Rawalpindi, it can go to Peshawar in the night and come back. So that kind of thing, these are then making use, more rigorous use, more magnitude, more traffic is carried. The more you carry, these are isko kehte hain economies of scale. Aapka costs वही रहती हैं, but your revenues go up. Your cost remains the same or marginal फर्क आएगा, but your revenues go up. That is how then you make use. इसको economies of scale कहते हैं. Now these are important factors in all transport sector. मैं सिर्फ रेलवे की बात करूँ. Then rail transport की constraints are. It is all not very good. It has the transport has its limitations. वो limitations एक एक करके I'll let you know क्या है. For example, if you are given an option of having a motorway between Islamabad, another say motorway between Islamabad and Lahore, and there's an option for having a fast 200 km/h train between Islamabad to Lahore. क्या करेंगे? How do you decide? Because once you have invested in the train, in the track, it can't be used for anything else. It has to be used by the train, and it has to connect Lahore to Rawalpindi and Islamabad. You can't say कि जी Lahore से train निकली है, I will take it to Gujar Khan only. From there people can go. People will not travel by that train. तो ये that once you invest, it has to be used. तो ये इसकी एक limitation है. The second is that the initial investment in railways comes through a very heavy cost. And that cost is cost of construction of the infrastructure. It is the cost of construction, the operating and maintenance costs. ये बड़े heavy costs हैं. ये when we go down into the railways, then you will see. And of course, as I keep saying, try to compare it with others. Then railways is highly capital intensive. Initial infrastructure is very, very, very expensive. Your orange line is per kilometer cost is almost 16. If I exact figure, मुझे याद नहीं. Maybe it is about 16 to 20 million rupees per kilometer. Very, very heavy. Our ML1 upgradation was about $4 million per kilometer. When you compare it to orange line, ये peanuts है हमारा. Then infrastructure costs हो गया. You have to make the embankment. You have to go into the geotechnical studies और ये सारी hydrology, everything. Drainage से लेके embankment तक, embankment को safe, sound, compact बनाना. Then you are going to ballast में और rails में और fastenings में, and then railway stations and platforms and tunnels and you know what. So इस infrastructure पे you need a lot of money initially. So if you have that capital investment, capital means initial investment जो करनी पड़ती है. Then rolling stock again is very expensive. So one locomotive can cost you about $5 million. और $5 million वैसे कहना आसान है, but it is a lot of money. $5 million one locomotive, and to run one train daily, freight train say from Karachi to Saiwal, you need at least 6 or 7 locomotives per day. आपको चाहिए per day का वो train को चलाने के लिए. So इसी तरह rolling stock है. For example, one coach, passenger coach, and the average will cost you about $7 to $8 lakh. 0.7, 0.8 million dollars आपको पड़ते हैं कीमत, which is again expensive. ये मुश्किल काम है. So capital intensive. Then, as I said, this cost is for a specific purpose, non-transferable assets. You can't have a bus tomorrow. You say, okay, railway line not running, let us turn it into a road. You can't do it, and you can't run a bus or a truck on it. So it has to be that railway and fixed. That is why you have to be very careful when you're investing in the railway line, and you have to look at the returns. कि कब आएंगे, किस साल में आएंगे. So this work has to be done. Then the railways का थोड़ा सा ये है कि it does not, people will tell you it does not provide road to road, door to door facility like a truck. In a truck, you just load your container here and you can get it delivered in somewhere in Nawab Shah in your house. वहाँ पे उसी जगह पे पहुंच जाएगा. After a few, railways can't do this. But does it actually require to do this? When you talk of the nature of railways, वो bulk उठाते, bulk cargo उठाता है, bulk लोगों को उठाता है. So maybe you don't need it, but if there is a requirement, nobody can stop you. आप freight forwarding company के साथ just have a multimodal kind of a system. The long distance can go by train. From there, for shorter distance, you can have trucks, and you can even have maybe one fare ticket cut. ये हो सकता है. This is happening all over the world in multimodal transports. तो वो door to door service को और कम कर दिया. Then transshipments होती हैं. Transshipments, of course, they cost a lot of money and they cost time. Like we were sort of engaging with the cement plants in Chakwal. and we thought we will bring their coal in, put them down on the main line somewhere near Mandra, Kujar Khan. We will have a bulk depot there. From there, they'll take it to their own sort of factories. But then when we looked at the economics, getting the coal out, it will come from Karachi all the way to Mandra or Gujar Khan. Mandra is a small place, Chakwal is nearer. Then this coal will be transported by trucks to the different cement plants in Kalar Kahar area and Chakwal area. But then when we looked at the economics, unloading at this point, maintaining that storage there, it of course has its own costs. Then getting the trucks into that storage area and taking it by road to the factory area, that was adding to the costs. So that economics was not working out, but we are still on it. The railways are still on it. Once the volumes are assured, once the bulk is assured, then this becomes a viable project. But I'm just saying that transshipment involves cost and time. Similarly, when the train comes in from Iran to a place known as Zaidan, out there, then it has to be transshipped because they have a standard gauge, we have a broad gauge. But those transshipments from rail to rail are actually does not involve much time these days. Things have machinery are there, cranes are there. You can transship a full train of containers on from broad gauge to narrow standard gauge, or from standard gauge to broad gauge within 2 hours if you want it. And this I've seen happening in China and between China and Russia. There's a difference of gauge. So the train would they would pick up the train, put it on another gauge, and take not more than 2 hours. By that time, your immigration, you would be done with the immigration, come back and sit in the same thing with a different gauge. Now here I'm showing you just a picture of the railway network in the world. जो काली लाइनें हैं, look at Europe. On the east is China and Japan, Malaysia, Indonesia, Vietnam. Then India, of course, we should frankly, India, Pakistan, and Iran and all that, and Bangladesh, we should be grateful to the British that they gave us this network. Then Russia, huge country, but connected by different railway lines here. And then look at Europe. It is all fully. Can you see my marker cursor?
Yes, sir.
So look at the congestion and look at the number of railway lines in Europe. The entire Europe is connected by rail. And that, as I keep saying, these are the factors of growth, economic development. The more railway lines you have, that country has prospered. Then here in the US and Canada, in the east of US, a lot of railway connectivity, but somehow they've been left behind. China has gone far ahead. Then, of course, Latin America, maybe in African countries connected. South Africa is good. Yeah, Kenya, this railway line. Egypt may have railway lines and jaga. So this is just a rail network to show you how the world is connected by rail. Now I'll come to what railways means. What definition? What is railways? So one definition, and I'll give you different definitions. Aapki marzi hai, jo aapko pasand hai. But then you see how they change. Definition is rail transport, also known as train transport, is a means of transferring passenger and goods on wheeled vehicles running on rails which are located on tracks. My lecture positive. About. So rail transport is a means of transferring passengers and goods. Again, passengers and goods on wheeled vehicles running on rails which are located on tracks. Now this is one person, one definition. Another person says it is a track consisting of parallel rails parallel rails over which wheeled vehicles such as trains may travel. So he says any wheeled vehicle is a train, such as trains may travel. Then another one says a transport system using rails to move passengers and goods. Okay, almost the same in putting it in different ways. Passenger, goods, rails, and connecting 2 points. So ये definition as transport में भी थी, इसमें भी है. Then railway is a route. इसको Americans route कहते हैं, अंग्रेज route कहते हैं, whatever you want to call it. A railway is a route between two places along which trains travel on steel rails. वही चीज है. Trains travel on steel rails between two places. Then another one says a railway is the system and network of tracks that train travel on. In a different system आ गया. It's a track system. A permanent track composed of a line of parallel metal rails fixed to sleepers for transport of passenger and goods in trains. Now this gentleman has brought in he has defined the rails. Rails fixed to sleepers. You know what a sleeper is, ना? I hope आपको sleeper का पता हो. नीचे रेल के नीचे लगा होता है, इसको स्लीपर कहते हैं. खैर, the entire equipment, दूसरा कहता है, the entire equipment, rolling stock, buildings, property and system of tracks used in such a transport system. ये इसको रेलवे कहते हैं. Then organization responsible for operating a railway network, वो कहते हैं, इसको रेलवे कहते हैं. Organizations में लोग भी आ जाते हैं, ह्यूमन एलिमेंट भी आ जाता है, ट्रैक्स भी आ जाते हैं, इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर भी आ जाता है, हर चीज आ जाती है. तो ये थोड़ा वाइड कर दिया, उसको लेके चले गए. नाउ व्हेन यू लुक एट पाकिस्तान में रेलवेज इज रन अंडर द रेलवेज एक्ट ऑफ 1890. ये बड़ा पुराना रेलवे एक्ट है, 1890 में आया है. साथ साथ ये वो होता रहा, अमेंड होता रहा है, लेकिन बेसिक एक्ट वही है 1890 का. And let me tell you, even today, I don't see anything wrong with the act. You can do whatever you like. आप इसको privatize करें, आप इसको public private partnership में दें, जिस तरीके से, but this act is valid even today. और यही act इंडिया में भी है और ये act हमारा भी है. इसमें changes होती रही, amendments होती रही हैं, but the act is the same. Now, definition of railways, what does the act say? It says the railway means the railway or any portion of the railways for the public carriage of passenger, animals or goods, and includes all land within the fences or other boundary marks indicating the limits of the land appurtenant to the railways, मतलब related to the railways. वो अगला कहता है कि all lines of rails, sidings, branches worked over for the purpose of or in connection with the railways. The railways में sidings होती हैं, branch lines होती हैं, पता नहीं. So he includes everything as part of the railways. Then the definition of Railway Act 1890 says all electric traction equipment, power supply, distribution installations used for the purpose or in connection with the railways, वो भी railway system में आ जाती हैं. It is the railways. All railway stations, offices, warehouses, wharves, workshops, manufacturing facilities, fixed plants, and machineries and other works constructed for the purposes of or in connection with the railways. That means railway workshops जो हैं, Bhagalpura workshop है, factories हैं हमारी, ये कहते हैं this is all part of the railway system. ये सब railways हैं. All ferries, ships, boats and rafts which are used on inland waters for the purpose of the traffic of the railways and belong or are hired or worked by authority administering the railways. ये आजकल this clause maybe it seems redundant, But I told you the other day that between Multan and Kotri, ferries used to run. These ferries, flotillas, इसको कहते थे, इसको बड़े-बड़े ships होते थे, ये cotton ले जाते थे. They, most of them were sort of connected to the railway companies. तो वो ही चलाते थे. You will be surprised, there's a designation in the railways जिसको assistant engineer bridges है ना, इसको कहते हैं AFX. आज भी, today, even today, AFX means ferry engineer, assistant ferry engineer. Ferry wo, it is related to, it is like a ship which carries goods and passengers. So ye aaj abhi bhi hai. At that time it was more important, to isliye ye Railway Act mein aaya. Now this of course has to be changed, but wo koi change nahi karta, it doesn't matter. So ye railway defined kar. So now I finish here, then aage fir isko uthayenge. Any question that you may have, any question, wildest kind of question, I will be more than willing to answer.
No, sir.
जी?
No, sir.
कोई question नहीं है?
Yes, sir. No questions.
चले. So we call it a day. खैर ये तो ज़्यादा descriptive है. But again, as I said, I came from transportation. I went into railways. I told you how it is important for economic development. I told you how railway networks are operating in the world. किस दुनिया में किधर जा रहे हैं? Why it is required? And we then discussed and we came down to definitions of then Pakistan Railways के 1890